The Sarawak Communist insurgency occurred in Malaysia from 1962 to 1990, and involved the North Kalimantan Communist Party and the Malaysian government. It was one of the two communist insurgencies to challenge the former British colony of Malaysia during the Cold War. As with the earlier Malayan emergency, the Sarawak communist insurgents were predominantly ethnic Chinese, who opposed to British rule over Sarawak and later opposed the merger of the state into the newly created Federation of Malaysia. The Sarawak communist insurgency was triggered by the 1962 Brunei Revolt, which had been instigated by the left-wing Brunei People's Party in opposition to the proposed formation of Malaysia. The Sarawak communist insurgents were also supported by Indonesia until 1965, when the pro-Western President Suharto assumed power and ended the confrontation with Malaysia. During that period, the NKCP's two main military formations were created: the Sarawak People's Guerrilla Force or Pasukan Gerilya Rakyat Sarawak, and the North Kalimantan People's Army or the Pasukan Rakyat Kalimantan Utara. Following the end of the confrontation, Indonesian military forces would cooperate with the Malaysians in counterinsurgency operations against their former allies. The North Kalimantan Communist Party was formally established in March 1970 through the merger of several communist and left-wing groups in Sarawak, including the Sarawak Liberation League, the Sarawak Advanced Youths Association, and the NKPA. In response to the Sarawak communist insurgency, the Malaysian federal government created several controlled areas along the Kuching Syrian Road in Sarawak's 1st and 3rd Divisions in 1965. In addition, the Sarawak Chief Minister Abdul Rahman Yaqub also managed to convince many of the NKCP insurgents to enter into peace negotiations and lay down their arms between 1973 and 1974. Following the successful peace talks between the Malaysian government and the Malayan Communist Party in 1989, the remaining NKCP insurgents signed a peace agreement on 17 October 1990 which formally ended the insurgency. History. Background. Besides the main communist insurgency in Peninsular Malaysia, another one occurred in Sarawak, one of Malaysia's Borneo states. As with their MCP counterparts, the Sarawak Communist Organisation or the Communist Clandestine Organisation was predominantly dominated by ethnic Chinese but also included Dayak supporters. However, the Sarawak Communist Organisation had little support from ethnic Malays and the indigenous Sarawak races. At its height, the SCO had 24,000 members. During the 1940s, Maoism had spread among Chinese vernacular schools in Sarawak. Following the Second World War, communist influence also penetrated the labor movement, trade unions, the Chinese language media, and the predominantly Chinese Sarawak United People's Party, the state's first political party which was founded in June 1959. Communist objectives in Sarawak were to achieve self-government and independence for the colony, and to establish a communist society. The communist organization operated through both legitimate and secret organizations to propagate communist ideology. Their tactic was to establish a united front with other left-wing and anti-colonial groups in Sarawak to achieve their goal of independence of the colony from British rule. According to the Australian historian Vernon L. Porritt, the first known Sarawak communist organisation operation was an assault on the Batu Kitang Bazaar on 5 August 1952. In response, the Sarawak colonial government approved more funding for security measures, strengthened the security forces, and introduced legislation to deal with internal security. Sarawak communists were also opposed to the formation of the Federation of Malaysia, a sentiment that was shared by the Indonesian Communist Party (AM), Azahari's Brunei People's Party, and the Sarawak United People's Party. The Brunei Revolt, according to the historians Chibun Keng and Vernon L. Porritt, the Sarawak insurgency formally began after the Brunei Revolt in December 1962. The Brunei Revolt was a failed uprising against the British by the AM, Azahari's Brunei People's Party, and its military wing, the North Kalimantan National Army, who were opposed to the Malaysian Federation and wanted to create a North Borneo state consisting of Brunei, Sarawak, and North Borneo. According to Porritt, the SCO leaders Wen Min Kuan and Bongki Chok were aware about AM Azahari's planned revolt but were initially reluctant to resort to guerrilla warfare due to their weak presence in Sarawak's 4th and 5th Divisions, which were located adjacent to Brunei. In December 1962, the SCO still lacked a military wing and its members had not yet undergone military training. Following the Brunei Revolt, the SCO switched to a policy of armed insurgency from January 1963 since the defeat of the Bruneian rebels deprived it of a source of weapons. The Sarawak communist organization's guerrillas would fight alongside the TNKU and Indonesian forces during the Indonesia-Malaysia Confrontation. Following the Brunei Revolt, the British authorities in British Borneo, in cooperation with the Malaysian Special Branch, launched a crackdown of suspected communists in Sarawak, which prompted 700 to 800 Chinese youths to flee to Indonesian Kalimantan. There, these communists received military-style training at Indonesian camps. At that time, President Sukarno was pro-communist and anti-Western. As with Sukarno and the Indonesian Communist Party, the Sarawak communists opposed the newly formed Federation of Malaysia as a neo-colonialist conspiracy, and supported the unification of all former British territories in Borneo to create an independent leftist North Kalimantan state. According to the former British soldier and writer Will Fowler, the so-called clandestine communist organization had plans to launch attacks on police stations and to ambush security forces, paralleling similar tactics used by the Malayan National Liberation Army during the Malayan Emergency. The Indonesian Confrontation. Due to the Sukarno government's hostility to Britain and Malaysia, the Sarawak Communist Organization used Indonesian Kalimantan as a base for building up a guerrilla force. These communist exiles in Indonesia would form the core of the North Kalimantan Communist Party's two guerrilla formations, the Sarawak People's Guerrilla Force and the North Kalimantan People's Army. The Sarawak People's Guerrilla Force was formed on 30 March 1964 at Mount Asuhan Sang in West Kalimantan with the assistance of the Indonesian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The SPGF's leaders included Bongki Chok, Jang Chuchung, and Wen Min Kuan. According to Convoy, the PGRS numbered about 800 and was based in West Kalimantan at Batu Hitam, with a contingent of 120 from the Indonesian intelligence agency and a small cadre trained in China. The Indonesian Communist Party was also present and was led by an ethnic Arab revolutionary, Soloyan. The PGRS ran some raids into Sarawak but spent more time developing their supporters in Sarawak. The Indonesian armed forces did not approve of the leftist nature of the PGRS and generally avoided them. Meanwhile, the North Kalimantan People's Army was formed by Bongki Chok near Melawai River in West Kalimantan with the assistance of the PKI on 26 October 1965, while the SPGF under its commander Yang operated in Western Sarawak. The NKPA operated in Eastern Sarawak. The NKPA was initially commanded by Lam Wah Kwa, who was succeeded by Bongki Chok. According to Kenneth Convoy, Sobandrio met with a group of Sarawak communist leaders in Bogor, and Nasution sent 3 trainers from Resamin Para Commando Angkatan Darat Battalion 2 to Nangabadan near the Sarawak border. where there were about 300 trainees. Some 3 months later, 2 lieutenants were also sent there. To support this ruse, they even named the organization the North Kalimantan National Army, to link the SCO to the original Brunei rebels. While the first raids included SCO members, they were often led by regular Indonesian officers or non-commissioned officers from the Marine Commandos, the Army Para-Commandos, and the Air Force paratroopers. Following an attempted coup by pro-PKI elements in the Indonesian military in October 1965, General Suharto assumed power and launched a purge of communist elements. Overnight, the Sarawak communists lost a safe haven, and the Indonesian military would subsequently cooperate with the Malaysians in counterinsurgency operations against their former allies. According to Porrit, the Indonesian anti-communist purge was also accompanied by a Dayak-led pogrom targeting the ethnic Indonesian Chinese in West Kalimantan, which received tacit support from the Indonesian authorities. Counterinsurgency efforts in response to the Sarawak Communist Organization's activities. The Sarawak and Malaysian Federal resorted to various counterinsurgency operations. On 30 June 1965, the Sarawak government's Operations Subcommittee of the State Security Executive Council implemented the Good Sir Plan. This plan involved the resettlement of 7,500 people in 5 temporary settlements along the Kuching Syrian Road in Sarawak's 1st and 3rd Divisions. The Good Sir Plan was named after David Goodsir, the British Acting Commissioner of Police in Sarawak. These settlements were protected by barbed wire and modelled after the successful new villages used earlier during the Malayan emergency. As with the Briggs Plan, the Good Sir Plan's controlled areas succeeded in denying the SCO access to food supplies, basic materials, and intelligence from their Chinese supporters. By the end of 1965, 63 suspected communist activists had been identified by the authorities. By the end of 1965, the federal government had built 3 permanent settlements at Siburan, Baratok, and Tapir to replace the 5 temporary settlements, which covered 600 acres and were designed to accommodate 8,000 inhabitants. By the 22nd of July 1966, the Malaysian Prime Minister Tunku Abdul Rahman estimated that there were approximately 700 communists in Indonesian Kalimantan and about 2,000 sympathizers. The Tunku also offered amnesty and safe conduct passes to SCO guerrillas under Operation Harapan, but only 41 guerrillas accepted this offer. The end of the Indonesian-Malaysian confrontation also enabled the establishment of military cooperation between the Indonesian and Malaysian armed forces against SCO guerrillas in Borneo. On October 1966, both governments allowed their military forces to cross the border in hot pursuit operations. Between 1967 and 1968, Indonesian and Malaysian military forces took part in joint operations against the Sarawak communists, which took an increasingly heavy toll on both the Sarawak People's Guerrilla Force and the North Kalimantan Liberation Army. Due to a decline in manpower, resources and increased isolation from their support base, the SCO shifted from guerrilla warfare towards re-establishing the movement's link with the masses, including the natives, to preserve the armed struggle. In February 1969, the Sarawak United People's Party's leadership reversed the party's anti-Malaysia policy following a meeting between the party's leader Stephen Yong and Prime Minister Tunku Abdul Rahman. Prior to that, the SUP had been the main left-wing opposition party in Sarawak and enjoyed the support of Sarawak's ethnic Chinese community. Several members of the party were also members of communist-affiliated organizations like the Sarawak Advanced Youths Association, the Sarawak Farmers Organization, and the Brunei People Party's guerrilla wing, the North Kalimantan National Army. The SUPP's communist elements were decimated as a result of a statewide crackdown by the authorities between 1968 and 1969. Following state elections in July 1970, the SUPTA then entered into a coalition with the Alliance Party's Sarawak partners, the Bumiputera Party and the Parti Pasaka Anak Sarawak, in the Sarawak State Legislative Assembly. This enabled the Malaysian federal government to consolidate its control over Sarawak. In exchange, Stephen Yong was appointed to the State Operations Committee, the state's security committee, which enabled the party to influence counterinsurgency operations and to look after the welfare of SUP detainees and Chinese settlers in the resettlement centers. On 25 March 1969, Indonesian forces eliminated the third branch of the SPG efforts Songkong in West Kalimantan following a two-day battle, wiping out the Sarawak People's Guerrilla Force's largest corps. To replace the decimated SPGF, the Sarawak Communist Organization created the North Kalimantan People's Guerrilla Force at Nonik on 13 July 1969. The North Kalimantan Communist Party on 30 March 1970, when Ming Kuan, the head of the Sarawak People's Guerrillas in Sarawak's 1st Division, formed the North Kalimantan Communist Party. However, the 19th of September 1971 was chosen as the official date of the formation of the party to coincide with the Pontianak Conference, which had been held on 17 to 19 September 1965. While the Pontianak Conference was regarded as the foundation of the Sarawak Communist movement, none of the conference attendees were communist. Instead, they consisted of members of the Left-Wing Liberation League and their members of the Advanced Youths Association. While they had discussed creating a communist party in Sarawak, they delayed doing so until 1971 due to the tense political situation in Indonesia. Defections and decline. The Sarawak Chief Minister Abdul Rahman Yaqub also made several overtures to the NKCP insurgents and managed to convince several of the insurgents to lay down their arms. In 1973-74, the Malaysian government scored a key victory when Rahman Yaqub successfully convinced one of the NKCP leaders, Bong Kicho, to surrender along with 481 of his supporters. This was a heavy loss for the NKCP since this number comprised approximately 75% of the NKCP's entire force in Sarawak. After this defection, only 121 guerrilla fighters led by Hung Chu Ting and Wong Lian Ku remained. By 1974, the communist insurgency had become confined to the Rajang Delta. Both sides sustained casualties and many civilians were also killed and wounded in the crossfire. Following the successful Hat Yai peace accords between the MCP and the Malaysian government in 1989, the remaining NKCP guerrillas decided to end their insurgency after one of their Chinese contacts, Weng Ming Kuan, convinced them to negotiate with the Sarawak state government. In July 1990, a series of negotiations between the NKCP and the Sarawak government took place at the town of Bintulu. By the 17th of October 1990, a peace agreement formally ending the Sarawak communist insurgency was ratified at Wisma Bapa, Malaysia in the state capital Kuching. Shortly afterwards, the last remaining NKCP operatives led by Ang Cho Teng surrendered. These developments ended the Sarawak communist insurgency.